All right, so today we are doing a bit of a flashback analysis, is what we're going to call this. It was about a year ago from now, actually. I forget exactly when this debate occurred, but Steven Crowder was doing his Change My Mind event, or whatever you want to call it. And his Change My Mind was Socialism is Evil, Change My Mind. And the first guy who he ends up debating is a guy named Yusuf, and he ends up getting taken to task, man. He gets murked, he gets pulverized, he gets plowed, he gets bazonked, he gets doinked. Literally every fucking cringy verb you can think of, that ended up happening. So we're actually going to watch this. And by the way, apparently there was a petition that someone started. I don't know how many signatures it ended up getting. Someone can let me know, to have Yusuf back on Change My Mind, because what ends up happening, and we're going to look at this, is basically Steven Crowder finds little outlets to get this fake trigger, like fake being triggered. It's like, oh, you're being rude. And then he uses that to then end the debate, because he was getting mauled and he was actually having a serious discussion. And anytime that happens with someone like Steven Crowder, you've got to end it immediately. And to the credit of the people who watched the video, if you go through the comments, there's actually a ton of people calling him out on it. So I do want to give some credit to those people, because I rarely end up doing it. But we're going to look at a bunch of different clips here. Some of these are going to be short. So this one we're going to look at is going to be super short. It is about Steven Crowder's position on the minimum wage.
Nice to meet you, Stephen. So I believe, let me explain my position. I believe that socialism is fundamentally evil. And I have this here. We usually don't reference this, but it's sources in case someone wants to look at them afterward, but I don't think, I won't use it. It's not fair for me to use them. So I believe socialism is evil. Right. You disagree. I would love to hear you change my mind.
Okay, well, what's your position on the minimum wage?
Well, hold on a second. Is this your changing my mind? I want to make sure.
Yes, I want to get started.
Okay, my position on the minimum wage. Yeah, you know what? I'm not a fan.
So you think there shouldn't be any minimum wage at all?
Yeah, not a fan.
Zero.
Not a fan.
Okay, are you...
So Yusuf is for a minimum wage, obviously, as the majority of Americans are. It's ridiculous not to support a minimum wage. And I actually didn't even, he says he's not a fan. And so basically what he means is, if he could choose, he would make an implementation where there is no minimum wage. Think about how insane that is. That means that you're talking about exploitation just being rampant in the country, and just basically, I mean, we don't even have like a solid line in the United States now, and in other countries like Australia has like a sky-high minimum wage, and the Scandinavian countries, they don't have minimum wage laws. What they have instead is extremely strengthened unions, in which essentially there's an underlying, unwritten minimum wage that exists, meaning that, there's no law identifying that, hey, this is the minimum wage, but it's an unwritten, understood minimum wage that exists, and that's why they have high wages there, is because they have very strong unionization. And so, conservatives are not fans of unions, especially Steven Crowder, by the way. He's made, remember that whole, I don't know if I want to call it a brawl, but he got socked by that old guy. He was trying to basically flare tensions at this union protest, I think is what it was, so that he could go on Fox News and shit on unions. So he doesn't like unions either. But think and keep this in mind when we're talking about Steven Crowder here. Anytime you think of Steven Crowder, think of a lunatic who says that there should be no minimum wage. Who says he's not a fan of the minimum wage. The conversation should not be whether or not we should have a minimum wage. The conversation should be, where should the minimum wage be placed? So I thought that was something that I noticed that was really crazy that I hadn't noticed before. So I thought that was worth pointing out. Now, the clip I'm going to show you guys is where the first triggering happens. Check it out.
But I believe that socialism, the ism that we both agreed upon,
Yeah.
the collective means, seizing of distribution, production, is immoral.
I mean, the argument is absurd, because if you say that it's immoral, then you also have to say that government funding of police is immoral, government funding of the military is immoral. Anything the government does is immoral, and that's ridiculous, because you have to have some state that's going to socialize certain things. And so the question is not, do we have socialization, it's how much.
Sure. I would disagree with that. Now, would you know where I disagree with that? Guess what I'm going to say.
I assume you're going to try to argue that government funding of the military and police is not socialism.
Why would I say that?
Well, because if you don't argue that, then you're going to have to give some ground on socialism.
No, absolutely. I think you're right. If I have to concede that police force, as he's saying, police force, military, roads is socialism, the same as healthcare, education, and I'm assuming that's why you're referring to Denmark and Sweden. They're not socialist economies, but they have more of a social safety net. That's kind of what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, they're social democracies.
They're market economies with higher emphasis on a social safety net. That's how they describe
That's
it.
what a social democracy is.
So okay, we agree on the term. Let's go with social democracy. I just want to make sure we don't get confused like democratic socialism as though that changes anything. But we just talked about this, conceding that ground.
Yeah.
I don't believe that the military and the police force would be the same as socialized healthcare school.
Why not?
Sorry, because we only have one microphone. We had to do a late setup. I appreciate you working with me.
Well, I mean...
Why not? Why not was your question.
Our definition was that...
So why not?
Yeah.
Okay, so make sure you don't... why not? Because there's a difference between a public good and a commodity. Can you explain to me the difference between public goods and a commodity?
Well, in economics, a public good is a good that is, I believe, non-excludable and non-rivalrous. So...
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that would include things like the police, the military. You'd be hard-pressed to even find hardcore libertarians to say that we don't need those. So there's a big difference. There's a fundamental difference between that and something like healthcare or school.
It's still
Or it goes to free internet, as Sven Computer talked about in Germany now. High-speed internet is a right. The second you declare any commodity to be a right or to be a fundamental role of government, that means the government can now remove that right depending on who's in power, and that's the problem. That's why I think it's fundamentally immoral for someone to take something they haven't earned, regardless of who's in power. I think it's immoral for Donald Trump's administration to take it from you, just as you probably think it's immoral for Barack Obama's administration to take it from me. So the difference there would be, first, public goods versus commodity. And I think that's an important distinction for everyone here to make, because it's a common argument we hear from the left. If you support any role of government at all, that means that this is socialism. But it's not according to the definition that we agreed upon. Something else, I think it also matters the constitutional parameters of government, right? What the Constitution defines what our government is and what fundamental human rights are.
Well, I want to get back to your earlier point where you said that because the military is a public good, that therefore it's not socialism. In your definition, you never made any distinction between different types of goods. You just said a socialist economy is one that takes wealth from some people and gives it to others, and that's what financing a public good is.
Well, no, it's not. You talked about redistributing, the common means of production or distribution. So if we want to frame that in, I certainly wouldn't say that that's the police. Oh, someone's yelling. Hopefully we're good. So I would not agree with you that the military or police would be socialist. That's really what taxes are. At the end of the day, we all agree on that.
Violence is part of life.
Okay, well, I don't believe there should be a part of life for someone with guns to come in if I don't pay for Timmy's health care. I just disagree with that.
If you don't pay taxes, you're going to have other forms of violence that arise spontaneously. This sort of autistic libertarian idea of, oh, you can have a non-aggression...
Stop it. He's been watching Matt Damon videos. Continue.
This idea of a non-aggression principle is just fantasy. Okay, you have to have
Describe to me, you just said autistic, and
Yes.
this was very civil until you brought that up. Define autistic here.
Well, it tends to be characterized by an overemphasis on logic and philosophy as opposed to reality. It's very easy to argue from syllogisms and axioms and all that.
So hold on a second, I want to make sure, before you move, because what you do is you speak in these paragraphs. We need to determine what these definitions are. I think we both agree that's fair.
Fine.
Okay, so you just said that autism, if I'm not mistaken, and I would love for you to bring this up, is rooted more in philosophy and theology than facts? Than logic or reason?
Logic, syllogisms, that sort of thing.
That's what you believe is the definition of autism?
Well, because it leads you down these intellectual...
No, do you believe that's the definition of autism?
No,
you
I'm
don't.
using it in an informal way.
Okay, so you're using it in an insulting way.
You could say that.
Okay.
A little bit of banter.
A little bit of, yeah. Well, we don't call that friendly banter generally. We
Okay.
call that being a dick. So I want to go back to hopefully keeping it civil. I wouldn't call you retarded. I wouldn't say that you had a
Fair
fight
enough.
with the Clippers and the Clippers won. I wouldn't do this.
So basically, Steven Crowder got called out by Yusuf. Yusuf was like, well, you never differentiated between a public good and a commodity in terms of redistribution of wealth. And what that means is you're making a distinction between a public good and a commodity, but when you said socialism is evil, you didn't say, redistributing wealth only for the purpose of public goods. That's not evil. You said that socialism is evil. So what you're talking about is you're making this distinction that you hadn't previously made, and this is a big problem that exists amongst hardcore conservatives as well as libertarians who will say either dumb shit like taxation is theft, and that's the really dumb one, because then you start getting into the lunacy of, okay, if taxation is theft, then we're not having a conversation of what the tax rate should be at. It should be, should we have taxes or not, which is hilariously stupid, because you need a society, and you need taxes to fund, having a centralized government. You need a military. You need public schools. You need the FDA. You need all kinds of things like that. Very basic stuff. You need a police force. You need a fire department, etc., etc. So that's insane, by the way. And he calls him out for that. And so the first triggering happens when Steven Crowder Yusuf says, there's this autistic idea of a non-aggression principle. Now, the thing here is that Yusuf's not even calling Steven Crowder autistic, because Steven Crowder doesn't believe in the non-aggression principle. I mean, he was for the Iraq War, so he can't be for the non-aggression principle. But he certainly is not an advocate of that. And he was talking about essentially a third-party position that exists, not Steven Crowder. But Steven Crowder jumped on that to use it as this outlet to get out of this debate in which he was getting mauled. And so he fakes triggering. And then like a couple minutes later, he ends up using it as cash for laughs, like to cash in with laughs from the audience and to gain brownie points from the audience. So it's like, not only are you, doing this to get out of the debate, you're doing what you're accusing Yusuf of doing, which is like, bro, what are you doing, man? What are you doing? And it was really ridiculous. And the point Yusuf was making was saying that basically because Steven Crowder said that, the cop shouldn't come to my house because I didn't pay for, Timmy's health care or something like that. Again, it's just like taxation that exists. And he's basically saying that if you don't have taxes in a centralized government, there's spontaneous violence that will arise from that. So that was the first triggering that Steven Crowder cashes in on to use it as brownie points for the crowd, as well as an outlet to end the discussion in which he's getting mauled. Now we are going to look at the second one. This one is also going to be interesting. Check it out.
Apple people, Android, they're going to start yelling. Tim Cook creating a better iPhone, even though the iPhone 10 kind of sucks. Yeah. Thank you. That's where we get the fashion. That doesn't hurt me. Him making billions of dollars from that doesn't hurt me. Poverty, bread lines, $160 for a dozen eggs. That hurts me. I have a problem with poverty. I don't care if someone else has more than me, so long as I have a system where I'm able to do okay.
Do you understand that it's the upper class and the capitalists that want mass immigration and want illegal immigration because it's in their economic self-interest? If you're a Republican and you're with the capitalists, you're going against your own interests. The capitalists are not conservative. They're not.
Well, hold on a second. We're talking about capitalist, conservative, Republican here. So you're saying that capitalism, we're talking about the ism now, socialism versus capitalism. Yeah. I don't care what Paul Ryan does in his own time. I don't care what his front page news press is doing P90X and what he thinks about immigration. I couldn't care less. So what I don't believe it seems that you would agree in securing the borders. It seems that you would agree in stricter immigration laws.
I would. And you're not going to get it if you shill for the capitalists.
Well,
they're against you.
Define shill.
Well, if you're
I know you like to sound really intelligent by speaking in paragraphs. One thing, you've misused words several times. And if someone were to call you on it and be as rude as you are, you might look what you might refer to as stupid. Okay. So saying autistic or shill, define, because it's a very specific definition. You came in and just said shill. And I'm really quickly get ready to give the microphone to someone else if you don't stop doing this, because this isn't the goal of this. What's a shill?
Well, I think you're getting upset because you're losing the debate. But
That's fair. What's a shill? No. The person losing the debate is the one who refers to the other person as autistic and a shill. That's generally a good sign. So what's a shill?
I don't have the exact definition, but essentially someone who's, pushing or advancing somebody else's interests, I suppose.
For profit.
Fair enough. But a lot of these conservatives who...
Well, you're not talking to these conservatives, you're talking to me. This isn't a performance, Paul, here. That's why we're doing this out here. This is a conversation. You're talking to me. I just said that I'm against illegal immigration. It's okay. You can look me in the eyes. I'm not mad at you. I just think it's rude. It's okay. Don't worry. I mean, we're okay. I'm used to people being rude to me. I'm sure you're probably aware of this to one degree or another.
For somebody who really tries to act like, the left are snowflakes or whatever it may be, and the left has these trigger warnings and these, snowflake libcucks, libtards or whatever. That's Steven Crowder's entire shtick, by the way. And so when you have someone like that who's getting triggered over the term shill. And by the way, Yusuf had the right definition. Shill is just advancing someone else's agenda. And so he even, like, he had the definition too. This isn't like a Barry Weiss type of situation. And I mean, what he was making for his point, I mean, I could see what he's trying to call out a consistency amongst, capitalist Republicans, saying that basically you can't hold these two positions of I'm against illegal immigration and also a capitalist, because he thinks that those two are at odds, and Stephen didn't really seem to be able to answer that question. And the point Yusuf, I guess, was making is illegal immigration drives down the wages, and that's something that Bernie Sanders has also said. Remember when Bernie Sanders was asked by Ezra Klein, he randomly brought up open borders as if so it was really stupid, because there was some dumb tangential line that he was drawing between funding the programs that Bernie supports and open borders, which doesn't make any sense. And Bernie goes, no, that's a Koch proposal because they want wages to be driven down. And so he says that because if you look at it, there's the open border supported by the very, very tiny speck of a fringe left that exists, very small, very, very minor. And then you have the Koch brothers and libertarians who, remember, libertarians believe in the freedom of movement of labor, at least they're supposed to. That's, what real libertarians believe in. But the Koch brothers do support that. They have think tanks pushing open borders because they want to bring down wages. And then this is the last point that I'm going to bring. And actually, before that, I want to say that he plays that to the crowd. Did you see where he jumps in and interjects after he asked Yusuf a question, and then he's thinking in his mind fuck, I need to come back. And then he turns to the crowd and goes, no. The person losing a debate is the one using autistic and shill. And it's dude, you literally just have to, give me a comeback. And then he thought it up. You're so cringe. You just said this isn't a performance, and then you're performing to an audience, dude. And this is what Joe Rogan was talking about when saying these conversations are not supposed to happen in front of big crowds because it leaves open grandstanding. And Ben Shapiro is the king of grandstanding as well. He does it all the time. And it's just, you become a showman. It becomes a sport. It's not really a conversation. Another annoying thing about this convo was that Steven Crowder would sort of spontaneously, erratically interject by saying, he'd go, and I know that a lot of leftists will say this, so you need to watch this in a debate, as if it's some sort of a course, a school class on debating lefties. Instead of being engaged in a conversation with the person that you're in front of, you're literally trying to educate a crowd while you have someone in front of you you're supposed to be debating, which is super annoying. But this is the last clip we're going to look at. This is where Steven just succumbs to just flat out lying. Check it out.
Back to, again, Norway, Sweden. We didn't really kind of go to that. You've talked about them as successful examples. Now, we refer to them, and I would agree. I would agree that if we're going to take a model and say they've created a social safety net that functions better than many other countries, for example, socialized healthcare and education.
Yeah, what's wrong with that?
Good. Well, so you would support school vouchers.
I think, in general, vouchers, I think, have a problem because they do lead to the incentivization of private schools. But okay. Any way that the government
I just say because that's what Sweden does.
Yes.
So you would support more of a flat tax and increasing taxes on the middle class and the lower class.
I want a progressive tax.
Okay, well, that's not what happens in Denmark.
They should change it.
Okay, so you would want a lower corporate tax rate.
Not necessarily.
Okay, so here's the one thing. We point to, and I appreciate you taking, what was your name again?
Yusuf.
Yusuf. I appreciate Yusuf taking the time. Everyone give a hand to Yusuf. Appreciate it very much. We'll grab someone else here. Thank you, Yusuf. This is always interesting to me because we talk about this a lot, and I know, and if we look here, just so, I think we've talked about this, we're going to be actually selling for $5 or $6. I'm not looking for, we're going to be selling the Change My Mind pamphlet so that you guys can actually be prepared for some of these arguments.
Yeah, so if you fact check that, that's total BS. First of all, Denmark, they actually have a flat tax for their municipal level taxes, but their state level taxes is, from what I saw, a really progressive tax rate, because I think the lowest is 8%, and the highest was, I believe, and I might be wrong on this, but I could have sworn I read the highest was 55%. That's an extreme progressive tax, because that means you have it's the opposite of a flat tax. You've got, extreme going up high, you know what I'm saying? So he just straight up lied. He says that's not what happens in Denmark. The bigger tax, which is the state level tax, is not a flat tax. It's the opposite. It's a progressive tax. He just lied to you. Steven Crowder's a brazen liar. He still has that fake quote that came from Gregor Strasser on his website that I'm sure has been viewed hundreds of thousands of times. That's still up there, even though it's false. It was falsely attributed. This guy is a legit smear merchant and a liar. And it's pretty crazy to watch. And then he brings up the voucher system that exists in Sweden. And if you look it up, all you see is just a bunch of articles talking about how it was a massive failure and how there's pressure now to remove that because it was just a complete catastrophe. The rankings that they have for schools have been plummeting worldwide, the worldwide rankings, and it's just been basically world-renowned as a massive failure. So that point was also very stupid, although that's not really lying. It's just, it'd be like advocating something that's just a massive failure. I don't know. I'm trying to think of a, really great example of this. But anyways, and then he just simply doesn't mention that. And then the last point I want to make here is just because we look at certain nations and go, hey, look, or fuck certain nations, all of the modern industrialized nations, not some. We're talking about all of the modern, Germany, the countries in Europe, whether it be the UK, Germany, France, whatever. France has free college as well as free healthcare. All of these nations have free healthcare. Germany's had free healthcare since Otto von Bismarck. So there's all of this kinds of stuff. But just because we look at those examples and go, hey, look, these certain policies are working in these specific countries, that doesn't mean that we're going to go from being the United States to let's adopt every single policy of X country, especially when we cite Scandinavia, which is a bunch of different countries that all have different specific policy positions. They just all have universal health care and some other really strong social safety net programs. So overall, he got triggered. He did this fake triggering, which is extremely hypocritical from his existence. And he used those fake triggerings to get out of a debate he was losing. And then he just flat out lies to his audience, as I just, exposed for you. So let me know your thoughts about this. This was a really hilarious time. And it's a debate we're not going to forget. And before I actually forget, before Steven Crowder was dodging Sam Cedar, he's been dodging Yusuf. So next up is Sam Cedar.